Right, on today's show, we're gonna do something a little bit different. We're gonna do a little chair repair. So here's the story. A lady stopped by recently, and I'll tell you honestly, having a commercial location is a little bit weird for me. I am pretty private, but the fact that you have a commercial location, Nicole put us in Google so people know that there is a person here doing something with wood. They may not, totally understand. And I'm talking about Wood Whisperer fans here. We're talking about people who just live in the area. So what winds up happening is occasionally someone stops by with a request, usually to fix a thing. I used to do a lot of repair work and refinishing back in the day, so it's something I know how to do, but it's not something I really enjoy doing. And these days, everything I do is about producing educational content. So it's hard for me to just kind of stop what I'm doing and work on a repair for someone, especially since repairs and fixes often beget repairs and fixes. So they find that, oh, this person can do this, so now I'm gonna have them fix this, and this. But this lady stopped by, and I just couldn't say no. She said that this chair was one, I believe it's her husband, uses, and that he had a back injury and surgery, and when he sits down, he tends to just like throw himself down. So it put a lot of weight on this thing. It broke the caster off, and we're gonna see what we're getting into here. It's not gonna be a real complex repair, but I thought it would be cool to show you what I'm gonna do just in case it's a situation you run into as well. All right, so you can see it's a pretty substantial break here. This whole bottom section came off. This caster, here's the post, this actually has a little sleeve that goes in here first, and then the casters just pop into that. So hopefully we'll be able to maintain that functionality after this is done. We'll worry about this in a little bit. Thankfully, in a case like this, you always want to ask, do you have the pieces, the pieces that fell off? Because if we can get these pieces back together, you can see they go right along the grain. We might be able to just use regular glue, right? So as long as you have a good wood to wood connection, you can use a standard Type-On PVA style glue. But what I'm concerned about here is that I see more damage. I see other repairs that were done in the past. This is not the first injury this leg has received. On this side, I can actually see a dowel that was inserted as part of a repair. So my guess is there was a crack and someone actually just popped a dowel right in there to kind of hold that thing together. And I don't know how old this is, but obviously it worked for a little while, but eventually gave up. Let's rotate this around. Now it might be a little bit tough to see, but right here is a fracture that's been fixed. I could feel kind of a ledge there. It doesn't feel like it's splitting any further, but clearly that's more evidence of a previous repair that was done. All right, let's see if I could show you the inside here. Yep, there is a crack here on the inside as well. Now, the good thing though is this seems like it's still intact. It's a little uneven, but I don't feel those pieces separating. So whatever repair was done before, seems like it's still working. The problem is with this many repairs, this many glue lines, this many things going on, chances are this is going to break again. So you know what's interesting? I'm looking at these little brass sleeves that are on the ends of the front legs. It would have been nice if they were on the back legs too. I think they actually are serving a pretty good purpose in kind of binding those fibers and preventing it from splitting out. My guess is the reason they did this is because the front leg here, the foot, is actually quite narrow, even a little bit more narrow than the rear legs. So probably a bit of a belt and suspenders thing, and then also it looks, good. It matches the rest of the chair. So after chatting with the lady for a little while, it became clear that she wasn't looking for a full high-end refinish, right? And I think it's important to ask these questions if you have someone asking you to do this kind of work. Make sure the expectations are set clearly. So in this case, I explained to her that I don't do this stuff anymore, but I can make this work, at least for a period of time until it decides to break again. And that I would do this almost like I would be doing a favor for a family member. So I'm not gonna charge her, I'm just gonna get this thing done. But I just wanted to make sure we were clear that there are better ways to make this repair that would involve color matching, possibly replacing an entire part or an entire component or a portion of that particular part of the leg. I think there's an inherent weakness in the grain there, and especially now that we have extra holes. There was the original hole for the caster, then there was a split, and then there's another hole for that dowel that's in there. We're just asking a lot of wood to continue to behave under these circumstances, but we could definitely do better than what we see here, get this thing functional again, and just do a nice thing for somebody who could use a helping hand. All right, so let's just get into it. This is gonna be fun. All right, so first thing I'm gonna do is tape off the areas that have finish on them, because whatever I do here, it's likely to get a little bit messy, and we don't need extra glue going all over the place here. Now, I don't expect it to be perfect up here. I'm just gonna kind of wrap it around a little bit. And like I said before, these actually would be candidates for just regular glue, some kind of a type-on glue in there, because we do have so much wood-to-wood contact. When it splits like this, you'll find that these things just kind of nestle in and they find their home pretty perfectly, which is kind of nice. But the problem is, I know this is going to fail again in the future. I really want to get something that's going to be gap filling to take up any extra space, and hopefully epoxy will do that for us. All right, so the epoxy we're going to use, West System, works really good. There's also Total Boat. You can get those in the pumps as well. But I love having epoxy in pumps like this. It's just so darn convenient. So what we're going to do is get a little bit of the resin and some of the hardener. And this is, oh, that one's going to be a little bit of a weird one. Had an air bubble. This is the fast hardener, and even though it says fast, it's still pretty slow. So don't have to worry about it setting up on us too soon. This is also a high density filler, which I like to add most of the time. It just adds a little bit of structure and also makes it a little bit thicker. A lot of people ask me about this darker color. This is not the normal color of the glue, but once you have it for a while, it seems to age to a bit of a caramel color. So that's the hardener that makes it that color, which works out well, you know, for wood, because we generally want it to be in this color family. So you don't even have to add any dye. But you see how much thicker that is now? So it still runs. We can make it thicker still if we wanted to, just to make sure it doesn't drip. But in this case, I actually want a little bit of a drippy action. Excuse my phrasing. I do want this to be a little bit thin because I want it to soak into the fibers all around this repair. All right, so let's just paint this with our glue. A nice full coating. I'm not worried about getting glue inside this hole because we're probably going to wind up re-drilling that later. It's funny, while I was doing some work, I had the garage doors open, and this multiple times this has happened while I'm working. I can only see legs coming up to the door, and it was a pair of white pants. And boy, do I know when I see white pants, I'm in trouble. Because it means I'm going to have work to do. Nothing against white pants, but it just seems to be the theme. All right, so let's get these two back together and then drop it on top. Probably should have taped these off too before I did this, but I was too busy talking, which means it's your fault. All right, gonna get that excess off of there. All right, now you might be wondering exactly how we're going to clamp this guy together, and there's probably a number of ways we could do it. I think at the very least, we're gonna do a tape wrap. And tape can be incredibly strong, but I really want to stabilize these pieces so they don't shift around much. And then if I can add a little supplementary clamping pressure, I will. But for now, I'm mostly focused on positioning and getting these pieces so they don't slide around. And I just kind of squeeze the pieces together as I bring the tape around the joint. Now, because it's epoxy, we have plenty of time to get this thing together. All right, seems to be holding together pretty well. See if we can add some clamps. Okay, we'll start here. One of these little quick clamps. I'll come in this way. And sometimes just a little spring clamp is all you need. Now, it's going to be tough for you to see, but what I'm looking for is on the end grain, I'm looking to see if I have squeeze out where I know these pieces are coming together, and that's kind of helping me gauge whether this thing is closed up as much as I want it to be. So we're going to let that sit for a while. I'm going to wait until the epoxy starts to gum up a little bit, and hopefully I'll be able to get this tape off and do a little bit of cleanup of the epoxy before everything gets completely solidified. Oh, and you know what? It's not going to hurt to put a little bit of glue into this end grain of the foot. Just kind of press it in there. Might not make any difference at all, but I am going to be putting that sleeve back into this end grain. So I want it to have something to bite into, and I want it to have every chance possible of surviving. While that epoxy dries, let me tell you about today's show sponsor, Norfolk Woodshop. Norfolk Woodshop is your one-stop destination for high-quality tools, supplies, lumber, gifts, and education. As a small independent business in Virginia, every purchase makes a big difference to their bottom line, and it allows them to provide the best customer service possible, whether by phone, email, or social media. They carry brands like Laguna Tools, AccuBurr, ShopFox, Nova Tools, Union Manufacturing, Isotunes, and Grand Wood Finishes. And they're big believers in making sure that you know a product's country of origin so that you can make an informed buying decision. They also proudly carry locally sourced Virginia lumber and live edge slabs, supporting small, sustainable mills right in their own backyard. But that's not all. Norfolk Woodshop is a hub for local artists. They feature handmade creations from local artisans, ensuring that every purchase supports the talented makers right in their community. While they do a lot on the local level, they also ship nationwide. So come visit Norfolk Woodshop in Norfolk, Virginia, or shop online at norfolkwoodshop.com. And if you act before January 11th, you can get discounts using the codes that we'll provide in the description. Norfolk Woodshop thanks you for supporting local craftsmanship and businesses like theirs, and they can't wait to meet you. Well, I had every intention of taking care of this last night, but Nicole came in, something about Ava, #family life, and I had to leave. So this is exactly as I left it. There might be some squeeze out from the epoxy that we have to deal with, but it is what it is, so let's get into it. And quite honestly, this is one of the reasons why I won't accept money for this kind of thing. I'm not able to, do the level of quality and guaranteeing my work the way that I might otherwise, or if the situation was different. So I'm just doing the best I can, given the circumstances. We'll start peeling this off and just see what we've got. Chances are there might just be a little bit of epoxy residue that we could scrape away or very carefully sand. Remember, I don't want to remove too much of the existing finish. All right, so now I'm just going to get a little scraper here. It's actually one of the Lost Art Press curved scrapers. So this nice curve here allows me to kind of pinpoint where I want to make contact, and I'm not hitting the entire surface at once. I'm just using this for a light touch and get rid of any, squeeze out any areas that just kind of aren't looking real good. We're going to make it look worse before we make it look better at this point. We're definitely going to expose a little bit of raw wood here. There's no way around it. These pieces are too uneven. So it's not even the glue that I'm scraping that's becoming the problem. It's the fact that when glued back together, the surfaces were not even, and I'm trying to kind of just level them a little bit so they're not as offensive visually. But if we can just get a little bit of brown stain, we can kind of touch up those areas, and we should be able to hide those flaws a little bit better. I'm just going to repeat this on all four faces. I don't think you want to see all that, but just doing a little bit of cleanup wherever I can. All right, so I'm just going to sand the epoxy on the foot, level it out a little bit. And now this little sleeve needs to be popped in there. Of course, we've got a little bit of squeeze out in there. So what I've done is I found a bit that looks like might be close to the original hole size. I'd rather start small and work my way up. If we make this too big, then that sleeve is just going to rattle around. Now I'm going to put just a little bit of CA glue. We'll do the gel here. I mean, honestly, I don't think it's going to hold very well in the long term, but I guess it just makes me feel a little bit better. Could use epoxy, but with those pumps, I got to mix up a whole bunch of it, and it's kind of wasteful. Okay, a couple of tappy taps. Now the key is you want to get those teeth to bite in. And we've done it. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how we're going to try to disguise this repair. There's a couple different ways I used to handle this back in the refinishing shop. One would be with dyes, and the other would be with pigments. So when we make our own color matches and things like that, we're making our own stain or toners. What we're gonna do is use a mixture of dyes and pigments to kind of get not only the color that we want, but sort of the consistency. So if you have a pigmented stain or a pigmented toner, a lot of times that will cover and obscure the grain because those color particles are actually much thicker. If you think of putting a lot of pigment into a finish, what does that become? Well, paint, right? And paint obviously completely obscures the grain. It's like a solid material once it's dry. So if you look at the existing finish and you see that, yeah, it does look like the grain is obscured a little bit. That's very common to do on commercial furniture because they often use wood species that's just maybe not that reliable in terms of its color and appearance. So they want to use a stain that's basically almost like a diluted paint to cover the grain so everything looks consistent from part to part. And that's probably what they did here as well. So I do see a little bit of a pigmented stain on there, and a dye would not necessarily do the trick for us here. So I don't have pigments anymore. I used to have a whole selection of pigments that I could put in a diluted lacquer to make my own toners. I don't have that anymore. But what I was able to do was to get some dark walnut colored oil-based stain. And I believe this probably, I mean, I know it says stain, but it's probably got some finish in there as well as like a protective layer, but we could put something on top of that afterwards. This is gonna allow me to kind of dust on light coats of color just to see how it goes and try to feather it into the rest of the leg. The problem is this finish is kind of green. And over time, stains, you know, colors, sun exposure, things will change over time. And I don't think it originally looked this green, but at least in my shop lighting, there's a green hue to it. I'm not going to be able to reproduce that. So again, the goal is to just kind of like make this less obvious. It's not going to be perfect, but we'll do the best we can. And I think this product is probably going to be a decent option. Light touch. Let's see how this goes. Now, it didn't quite get as much color as I wanted to on there, but what I'm going to do is wipe it back a little bit, especially on the areas where the old finish lived, and see what we're left with. Okay, let's let that dry, see what happens. Looks a little bit shiny right now, but time will tell once it off-gasses. And while that's setting up, we could talk about another approach we could take with this. Gel stains. Gel stains are pretty darn good because it's a very thick-bodied stain, doesn't run, just kind of sits on the surface, and there's usually enough finish in there to allow it to dry on the surface. Traditional stains, oil-based stains, if you leave a whole bunch on the surface, it just tends to get real sticky, right? So something like a gel stain, it's intended to kind of sit on the surface a little bit and it will cure and dry there. So we could very carefully get like a Q-tip and a walnut colored gel stain and just attack the areas that were lightened up. That's one way to do it. Again, none of this is perfect, but these are solutions you might come to if you're doing a more functional repair like this where you're just trying to get the thing done and make it serviceable again. All right, give this a few more minutes. All right, now my hope is that the stain absorbed into the areas that were raw and just basically raw wood. We don't necessarily want to leave the stain sitting on top of finished wood because that's never really going to dry. It's not going to cure properly. So I'm just very carefully wiping away the excess and trying to leave what I can on top of those raw areas. See if we can get that to work. All right, so I gave this guy the lion's share of the day to dry. It is oil-based stain, and you want to give it a lot of time. Overnight would be even better, but I'm moving this thing along, and I'm going to hit it with a lacquer top coat. Not a lot of lacquer, just enough to kind of protect that color layer, finish it off, kind of blend it in and make it look real nice. And this is just a rattle can, standard stuff from Home Depot, Lowe's, wherever. And this is a satin, I think is the right choice for matching the rest of the finish. All right, so we'll just apply very light coats. I'm not putting on a heavy coat at all. I'd rather go 2 or 3 very light coats than one massive coat. All right, last thing we need to do is take the caster and pop it in there. Now these generally should just kind of pop right in. The hole may be just a little bit too small so that that little sleeve was tightened down a little bit more than we wanted it to be. So I'm just gonna give this some gentle persuasion. I mean, we have to be very careful here because ultimately what we're doing is splitting a wedge into the thing we just repaired. So gotta be careful. There it is. That wasn't too bad. And before I put it down on the ground, let me give you a little bit of a better view here. Oops, I'm gonna spill my water. You see that? The repair is completely invisible. I'm just kidding, that's not the right leg. Here it is. So we got a little bit of a light wood area there. Not terrible though. Again, this is really just kind of repairing it and making it functional. This outside edge doesn't look too bad. Inside here, again, just a little bit of lighter stuff there, but feels pretty good to the touch. It's dry. Let's put it down on the ground. And I am not going to be throwing my butt into it. I'll leave that to them. Casters are a little weird, but that's not my problem. that was there before I got this thing, but it seems to be working okay. Oh yeah. Oh, I can feel it. This is quite comfortable. What a nice little chair. Okay, my work here is done. So just one more thing. I realized after I had finished that up, part of the problem with this chair is probably the casters. If the casters don't roll smoothly, if they catch a lot, and especially if they have this on a surface that might be maybe a carpet, and things aren't moving very efficiently, it's gonna put much more pressure on those feet, and they are absolutely gonna have a breakage sooner than later. So I took a few minutes to just kind of pack a little grease into the bearings and oil things up a little bit. Now this guy's sliding right along as you would expect it to. I mean, it's still not perfect. These are kind of old, but it's gonna be what it's gonna be. But it's certainly better than it was. All right, so the only thing left to do is to give her a call, let her know she can come and pick up her chair, and hopefully this will last at least a few more years so they can get more life out of it before it needs a more serious repair. And you know, just to clarify, there are better ways to do this repair. There are better techniques we could have used, better materials. That's not what this was about. This is about someone in your family breaks a thing, they take it to you because they know you build furniture. How do you fix it, right? So this is one of those functional repairs that isn't about making it absolutely perfect, just making it absolutely functional. All right, thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time.